All right, Crim 20, we have finally made it to chapter 16. Yeah, that was my phone too. Sorry about that. So, like chapter 16 says, we're going to talk about current and future issues in corrections. So, over the past 30 years, prison and jail populations have increased significantly, and if you look in your book, you will see that that is the case. In which most of you don't have that book, but whatever. Anyways, in 2002, that number reached 2 million for the first time. Just think about how many people is 2 million. Okay, in the city of Fresno, there's about a half of 1 million, half a million. In the entire county of Fresno, there's just shy of 1 million people. So double that, and that's how many people were literally in jail or prison. So, why has the population increased so dramatically? There's a lot of reasons why, but these are some of them. The war on drugs, crack era. It was during the 1990s, the crack era, which I've talked about before, when people got really insanely violent during that crack era, and people just got really tired of the violence. The community did, and said something needs to be done. We need to lock up these drug offenders longer. Did that work? Of course it did not. We know that, but that's how it kind of started. Being tough on crime, same kind of deal. We were getting sick of people being victimized, and putting a lot of pressure on politicians and on our legal community to change things. So we got tough on crime. 3 strikes came about. I think we've talked about where this originated. It was actually in Fresno, where a man named Mike Reynolds came up with 3 strikes after his daughter, young girl, maybe early 20s, was murdered in the Tower District in the 1990s. And she was murdered by a guy who had been in and out of prison for violent crimes on numerous occasions. So his dad wrote that bill. 2 serious violent felonies followed by any felony means life in prison. Okay, so 3 strikes is another reason why. Community thought that rehabilitation didn't work. I think we're right. Rehabilitation doesn't work. Neither does locking people up for significant periods of time. We haven't found that magic thing that works yet. And then the rising crime rates in the 1990s. So these are all reasons. Other things to think about also would be medical care. Our medical care has gotten a lot better. And our, what's it called? Life expectancy. Life expectancy is also higher, so that's why we have older people in prisons. Oh gosh, this is always a tough one. Incarceration is expensive. Community corrections is, of course, more cost effective. It's, of course, cheaper to have people living at home as opposed to taking care of their every need in a correctional facility. When the budget, the nation's budget, when the economy goes down, guess what else does? Budget for corrections. And I think I told you guys the first job I had, Tulare County Probation, I had been there for a couple months before the layoff list came out, and I was told that this was during an economic downturn, that I was the second person to go if there were layoffs, and they expected that there would be layoffs. It never did happen, but I jumped ship and came to Fresno. But if they don't have the money, they don't have the money, and they can't pay you if they don't have the money. This is one of the reasons why the boot camp program in Fresno County closed. Economic downturn, you got to make choices. Keep your probation officers and close your facility, or close your facility, or keep your facility and lose all your probation officers. So we definitely rely on the overall budget and economy for funds. And we are in a really interesting time right now. I'm recording this during the coronavirus shelter in place order time. You've all seen that our economy, and you probably feel it, our economy is just super struggling right now. So this could have some lasting impact on the world of corrections because we simply might not have any money. There are some private correctional agencies and facilities. They're not as common as I think people thought they would be. Will we look toward privatization when the economy is bad? I don't know. And that's a really good possibility right now because our economy is struggling so significantly. However, 2 months ago, we had the best economy we'd had in my lifetime. So it's really hard to say. But there are some issues with these private facilities. If you imagine a private prison gets people and they get paid by the state per person, per body in a bed. So what would their motivation be to rehabilitate these offenders? If the offender's no longer there, then they're not getting paid. So as you can imagine, there's a conflict of interest there in that they get paid per person in custody. So why would they be encouraged to work with the offenders and get them out? They wouldn't, because they would lose money. So there's an inherent conflict of interest. Staff diversity is something that's extremely important. Making sure racially and ethnically the facility, people who work in the facility look like the inmates. There is an overrepresentation of minority inmates, but not necessarily of diverse staff. So obviously you all can probably see this. And there were, I don't believe we're using the affirmative action programs anymore, but they do, corrections agencies are certainly looking for a more diverse staff. Evidence-based practices. This is something that was new to me when I came to probation. And this is basically when a person is deciding how to rehabilitate an offender, they're going to use data. They're going to use actual studies and documentation and information as opposed to a gut feeling. You know, for me, with probation, I could kind of just use my common sense or my gut feeling and say, okay, I think this kid has a lot of issues, so I'm going to see him every 2 weeks because I believe that he needs more supervision than some others. Well, we don't do that anymore. Now, each case goes through a little, kind of like a little ranking tool that will tell us how often we are to see people. And it's the same thing with people in custody and correctional facilities. So this is something new, relatively, and it's hard for the dinosaurs, as I was, the old school people, to change to. Technology has, even in my, when I first got to probation, we didn't have computers. No, really, I just said that. We didn't have computers. So, obviously, and that was in 1997, did not have computers. So can you imagine how much things have changed even in that time? If I can look something up on my phone while I'm out in the field as opposed to trying to go find someone's paper file, it made a significant difference. We also have electronic monitoring and it should say GPS, not GPG. Electronic searches, meaning going through people's phones, computers, things like that. DUI devices, you all have probably seen or heard of those where people have to blow into a tube before they can start their car. And then drug testing. We have some pretty cool new techniques in drug testing. Careers in corrections. Before the coronavirus, I would have said in California, if you want a job in corrections, you can have it because they are hiring like crazy. And I don't necessarily mean in institutional corrections, but those are also an option. I'm talking kind of more community corrections. How do we get them to be more professional? How do we get correctional officers to stay? It's tough. And I don't know the answers to these questions. What can be done to recruit and retain a high standard staff? It's tough. And that's it. This is the last chapter. We